So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Jason Kakoyiannis, managing partner of Ferment. Ferment are a company creation studio, really, that are driving the next wave of investment into synthetic biology product companies. And I've got to know Jason pretty well over the last few years whilst he was at Ginkgo Bioworks. And look, Jason, great to have you. I know I've tried for a few months, so it's great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining.
It's great to be here, Simon. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. And look, I know you didn't have the most, the path for you. I'd love to explore a little bit around some of the early upbringing and the key forces for you that really helped shape some of your influences.
Sure. Yeah, my journey into synthetic biology and company creation certainly hasn't been straightforward. I like to tell people I started out studying art history, spent some time in the art world for a while, was doing a Ph.D, realized I didn't want to become a professor. So I had moved to New York City, where I ended up with a gig of curating for the Whitney Museum. And believe it or not, started getting very deeply involved in fragrance and flavor. Started working on writing seriously about those topics. Got to network very, very much so in the industry based there in New York. Before I knew it, I was sensory obsessed. Was really intrigued by the fact that scent and smell were areas we didn't have a lot of language for, but they were really emotionally impactful. They were there sort of on the edge of perception. And so I started getting involved in that industry, but at the same time had charted my course out of the art world and into law. So I went to law school, but throughout that time was consulting for large fragrance and flavor companies. And then I graduated law school right into the downturn in 07, 08. So I was practicing M&A law, really exciting time, at a large white shoe firm in New York called Sherman & Sterling, working on all the finance deals that were in the headlines at the time, right? So the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, we worked on the sale of Merrill Lynch to Bank of America in 3 or 4 days. Then I found myself selling television stations for NBC Universal, and a number of other interesting kinds of deals at that time. But I always had kind of this hankering to get back into fragrance and flavor. So I managed to convince a few friends of mine who worked at a company called Givaudan to hire me into a non-legal role. So I soon found myself in a marketing, sales, and strategy role at Givaudan, where I spent several years really working with large brand clients. We developed the whole Tom Ford franchise with Estee Lauder, which was a fantastic ride. We were working on several major projects with L'Oreal, with P&G, Unilever, and Dove, and Axe, and a number of other flavor projects. So along the way, I got to collaborate with celebrities, with Puff Daddy, with Diddy, whatever he was calling himself at the time, and more getting involved in the R&D side of the business as well, right? And as you know, fragrance companies are very large logistics operations, sourcing ingredients from some of the most unstable parts of the world, right? So large logistics operations with creativity on top. And I was getting more and more fascinated with this. And so I found myself at a global conference in 2014 in Rome with our procurement team. And this was the kind of confab of the industry, where all the growers and traders are coming together from different parts of the world. The patchouli sellers from Indonesia, the cardamom sellers from Ecuador, the Chinese aroma chemical manufacturers. And so what I found myself was in a panel discussion on the uses of synthetic biology for producing aroma chemicals, right? And we'd heard about some of the work that companies were doing in this space already. Firmenich had launched Clearwood with Amyris. Allelix had developed Nootkatone. Evolva had its vanillin out. And, a lot of the perfumers I was working with and flavorists were aware, somewhat skeptical of this new technology. So I'm watching this panel with a gentleman named Jason Kelly from a company called Ginkgo Bioworks based in Boston on it. And, and he's talking to the growers and the agricultural leadership teams about how in the future ingredients will be fermented, on demand, high purity, molecular content that you can program into yeast. And it was sort of mind blowing, right? And the audience was transfixed. I thought they'd be running at him with pitchforks, but instead they were transfixed. And Jason and I met there, and conversation quickly ensued. What exactly could this technology do? What was synthetic biology truly capable of? We're brainstorming at that point. Can we make rare molecules like irones or musks or super high value things that you can't get through extraction or chemistry? And could we make things that were extinct, right? Flowers that were extinct. And so that was the beginning of a collaboration that's lasted many, many years. And I started working with Ginkgo shortly after. At the time, the company was around 25 people. The business team was Jason Kelly and just a handful of folks. And so I plugged in and really started to help translate this concept of fermented or cultured ingredients first into the industry I knew really well and loved, which is the fragrance and flavor industry. And it was almost like a cosmic irony that this powerful technology had shown up on that doorstep. And I wanted to make sure that the industry made good on it. And then that turned into sort of a crazy sprint from 2014 to 2016 with Ginkgo building the business and doing deals in the fragrance and flavor industry, in the enzyme space, chemical intermediates, consumer electronics, you name it. We were really crisscrossing the globe as kind of evangelists of what synthetic biology could do.
Amazing. Yeah, incredible. Tell me though, it sounds to me like you're the kind of guy who probably, when you put your kind of head to most things, you've gone from doing a PhD in art history to law to flavors and fragrance to synthetic biology. Tell me, what was the fascination first with the F&F space when you were doing the art history piece? What was the real connection?
What I loved about it, Simon, was what's happening in your brain when you are experiencing a scent or a taste. It's just a different channel, right? It's intractable to language, it's intractable to theory, and yet it's so emotionally impactful. And I wanted to understand that world and that experience. And then lo and behold, there's a whole industry around that. It fell down the rabbit hole, as they say, of fantastically talented people. There are fewer perfumers and flavorists out there than NBA basketball players. They're amazingly passionate, and we all live in this designed environment of scent and taste, but we really never give a thought about it. And so that the mixture of technology and artistic creation was in collaboration for me at scale, right? Billions of people were making this part of their lives every day. Was just, it was so exciting. That's why I jumped in. Yeah. And then it took something similarly, I think, profound, synthetic biology in the story there, to pull me out, to lure me out. And when I met Ginkgo, I felt like I had met the next great story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. First of all, Givaudan, when you were hired into a non-legal role, first of all, like thinking about Givaudan, thinking about the F&F companies, people are normally in that industry for 20, 30 years. And you must have been a bit of a, I wouldn't say an anomaly, but you would have brought something very different from the traditional type of individual that they hired, within there, as it were. And how did you find adapting into the culture and the way of Givaudan's kind of culture, as it were?
It was an amazing learning experience. I did have to work really hard to sell myself and to catch up. I had the benefit of amazing friends and sponsors who vouched for me. And I think when I showed up, I was a bit of a mystery, but that was a time when the industry was also shifting, and folks were interested in taking a risk on somebody who had learned a lot on my own, learned a lot in conversation, obviously didn't have any formal training, but these companies can provide that on the job. So found myself getting thrust into the deep end by people who trusted me. That was, from a career development point of view, such a chance to grow. And of course, hone my own skills in smelling and discernment, and really starting to work with customers in a different way. That's when I got very involved with consumer data and really starting to understand, a lot of the sensory work we were doing at Givaudan was going beyond liking and preference into
Right.
trying to understand a lot of the anthropological roots of why certain regions and countries were tied to certain smells and tastes, and what those meant, and how to evolve them into products.
Amazing.
So a
Yeah.
lot of really cool stuff happening there.
Yeah, which must have been hugely relevant and helpful when you go and join Ginkgo, who are a technology business, that want to leverage the technology into these particular markets. And then all of a sudden you've got someone that's bridging the gap that can provide the knowledge and the information on, I suppose what the customer is looking for, as it were.
You're nailing it. That was exactly what I thought I could do. I could help translate these worlds to one another. And on the Ginkgo side, I think there was, the company had been evolving. It was just finding market fit after about 6 or 7 years of building up the platform. And to some extent, I think it was a surprise to some that they were interacting with the fragrance and flavor industry of all industries. Why not pharma? Why not somewhere else? And so what we spent a lot of time doing was really trying to learn the language and the pain points of this unique industry and just sort of hear them. I remember lots of different conversations around Ginkgo. People were asking, why are we working in fragrance and flavor? We feel our platform can do so much more, or so many different things. And we talked a lot about, if you think about that industry, consumer products touch billions of people every day, right? They are the definition of mainstream in many countries. Being able to access consumer products is the entry point into middle-class life. And that's something actually pretty powerful. And if you want to work at scale, and you want to understand how to move the world, these are the kind of markets we want to be, and these are the kind of customers we want to be alongside.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me then, does when you go to Ginkgo and you start looking at the foundry or understanding the technology, how long does it take you to wrap your head around what they're doing and to be able to really learn in depth about the power of that technology?
I have to be honest, I think I'm still learning. This is another one of those OTJ, on the job situations where there were a lot of fantastic resources at the time. There were groups like Sinberg, which were more on the technical side. Ginkgo is doing a fantastic job of training up their business teams, but also just throwing us in, right? I found myself giving foundry tours within a month or two of getting involved with the company. And a lot of that was also by design, which was, we have to find a way to render this in language that's not necessarily technical, right? We're starting to interact with customers from a variety of different backgrounds. Not all those are technical backgrounds. So how do we translate the work that's being done here into actual, customer problems and pain points? But specifically on your technology question, I spent a lot of time working with the technology leads at Ginkgo, reading up and just kind of doing my best. And the funny thing is the technology is still emerging, right? At that point, 2014, 15, CRISPR was just starting to become a topic of conversation. Now it's almost old news. So it's been a few seasons and a few, evolutions in the technology stack over there as well. So I think we're all trying to keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a moving scenario. Just for the viewers, without going, too deep, can we just outline a little bit around what's different about Ginkgo's, technology at the time as it relates to being able to kind of use it in some of the markets that you've outlined, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I think what excited me about Ginkgo and still does was the ambition to focus on being a best-in-class cell engineering platform and platform only, right? And so that gives a mandate of being able to work across a range of different organisms, across a range of different classes of compounds, and be relevant to a range of different markets. Now, it comes also with challenges of how you serve these different types of customers in these different kinds of markets. In terms of the technology, what I always thought was profound about Ginkgo is that I think of it really as a chain of technologies that are linked. And in some ways, it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not a certain gene editing technology or a certain approach to AI or automation. It's sort of all of these things combined. And at any given point, as a new technology arises, Ginkgo is going to be the best at quickly integrating that into its stack and getting leverage from it, right? So look at a lot of the work they've done with Berkeley Lights, with this new acquisition of FGen for single cell analysis. They're hungry to integrate. That then allows them to continue to compound their economy of scale. And so that, I think it's really just that mission of being first to integrate technology, figure out how to leverage it, and move quickly into markets is what always attracted me.
Yeah, that's great. And just back on the F&F piece as well, because I think some of the initial collaborations were very, and I always remember hearing about this, we're dealing here at the time there was a crisis of the vanilla crop, I think there was, and massive price fluctuations. And, you saw people going to very, very small, secluded parts of the world to try and find this valuable kind of crop. So, when you think about synthetic biology and F&F, what has it delivered, or what has it been able to kind of produce from a material perspective that's of great value?
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. Like, the supply chain resiliency has been a big part of where F&F has gotten leverage from synthetic biology. There's two areas where synthetic biology can come into play. It's producing compounds like, as you mentioned, vanillin, right, which is the chemical component in vanilla, or one of them, that produces some of those aromatics. And then secondly, it's also getting to novel compounds, right? So being able to produce both drop-ins, which allows you to create stability, but also get to novel compounds, things that you can't get through extraction or other chemical means. So think of things that will drive creativity or drive creation, molecules you probably don't know about, but maybe, that give the special note to a type of wine, or the special flavor to a specific citrus, or even, moving into the sweetener space. So I think there's a lot of expanded functionality that you can get, but also, as I said, the resiliency around things that are already well known.
Got it. Yeah. And how much of it, you mentioned about the supply chain resilience, how much of that journey is around, or that creation is around sustainability, for instance, or doing more with less of the, using the world's resources, as it were?
I think that's kind of table stakes at this point for any global business, especially one that's managing supply chain as complex as the ones in F&F. So I think doing more with less is the mandate of any business, and has been for a while. Whether you call it sustainability or just efficiency, it doesn't matter. But meeting, right, the rising values of consumers implies now that you're doing more with less. But those consumers are also not interested in trading off anymore on performance, right? The kind of green premium, or the green discount, as it were, doesn't exist. It's got to be at par or better than alternatives. And so really being able to I think where companies are getting involved with synthetic biology is because they're on the one hand pressure to manage both sustainability, but also fluctuations in raw material, both supply chains and cost. And on the other hand, meet the demands of consumers who are ever more, who expect more all the time, and rightly should, right? And so you need things that can deliver value on the production side, but also translate through into differentiated products that on shelf, can excite consumers more than ever.
Yeah, and are we seeing that now in terms of products, do you think, or are we still creating them?
I think we're on the cusp now of starting to see things that were, R&D projects 4 years ago coming into market now.
Yeah.
Right. It's a long journey, because you've got to develop the biotech, and then you've got to develop the product, and then you've got to see the launch cycle all the way through. But I think we're now in a world where you see a lot more of that stuff coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, it's exciting times, basically. It's
for sure.
And certainly for something like Motif, I know you were really involved, back in the day in terms of founding and creating the, launching the food business, as it were, food ingredients business, which was Motif. I think they have product, coming to market real soon, or have product in the market at the moment, and that seems to be quite differentiated.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think John and Mike Leonard and the team over at Motif have done an incredible job of, first of all, getting acceleration from the way they work with Ginkgo and the foundry, right? It's a chance for them to outsource a lot of that work and move quickly to get into product. The company was formed in 2000, late 2018. And they've already, like you said, got 2 products that they're developing, a few more on the way. They're out there, highly relevant to a range of different customers in the food space. But what's interesting is they can really wrap those customers with solutions, right? It's not sort of a single ingredient play, but they've got multiple ingredients and multiple types of ways of addressing customer problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no, that's great. I mean, clearly the last few years has been a very exciting time for you in terms of, taking the foundry and the solution, and then being able to scale and build businesses. And I know recently you joined Ferment, and we spoke earlier around the company creation studio. So tell us more about what Ferment are, when you joined, and what they do, as it were.
Yeah, so we started Ferment. I started Ferment in the summer of 2021. And we are a company creation studio. What we do is develop the next generation of what I call synthetic biology product companies. And we work between biofoundry companies like Ginkgo, investors and entrepreneurs in residence, and come together and form a concept for a new company, develop the business model, develop the plan, stand it up, put capital behind it, and then often handle interim operations until we can hand that off to a full-time team, and we'll float out and become advisors. But this sort of grew out of what I had been doing for Ginkgo for a period of time. Found myself around 2018 really heavily involved in new company creation, right, where we saw an opportunity to develop new companies that could move quickly into markets where incumbents were slow to adopt or realize what synthetic biology could be doing. And so we found ourselves developing these companies, right? We, like, as you said, Motif, the concept was develop a next generation food ingredient company, that would use biotech to deliver a new palette of ingredients for creators and brands to work with. And this was before Beyond Meat had even gone public, but we recognized a tailwind in the way that people were thinking about food, and plant-based especially, and we wanted to be there. Similarly with Alonia, a company we created in waste remediation, using enzymes and microbes to break down industrial contaminants and remediate sites. We had seen that the waste conversation was starting to change. People were talking more about, how can I mitigate my waste, rather than how do they just simply reduce costs, or how can they mine waste for value? And these are things that biology is exceptional at. Microbes are designed to break down, components, especially organic chemicals. Can we accelerate that activity and point it at other types of contaminants? And so that inspiration led us to set up Alonia. We also did a company called Archaea, beauty company, focused on re-envisioning the way that biology and biotech can be used to develop active ingredients in beauty, led by a woman named Jasmina Aganovich. And so after doing those 3 companies, the realization was, to scale this activity, we should probably put it outside of Ginkgo. And so I left Ginkgo in 21 and started Ferment Co.
Wow. Okay. Sounds like a dream job for you. This basically.
It's great. I've got a fantastic partner and a team that we're growing. My partner is Brian Brazo, who was president of North America of Novozymes. And so he can talk to you all day about scaling ingredients, getting them out to market, and creating a reliable supply chain for customers. But the vision for what we're doing at Ferment Co is that company creation in biotech has changed as a result of the success that companies like Ginkgo are having, right? These foundry companies have created an economy of scale that allows product companies to be born on top of them, right? That we can outsource the cell engineering work, the creation of a recombinant expression system to make an ingredient, can outsource that work and design a company that can move quickly from day one, right? And be sort of headcount light on the technology side, or at least the synthetic biology side, move quickly. And instead, it will focus its time, attention, resources on the application development, right? The productization, the formulation, all the things that you need in order to translate something that comes off of a synthetic biology platform into a consumer or industrial end market, right? And that is often equally hard and challenging.
Yeah.
So let's resource that inside the company, leave the biotech to others, right?
Yeah.
And as a result, move quicker into market.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, really? Just in terms of the challenge on two sides of it. First of all, you've got this foundry and you've got the cell design, but then you've got everything else that as it relates to application, formulation, regulatory.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we saw the challenges that a lot of companies faced when they tried to be both platform and product.
Yes.
Right. It tended to be that what would happen was you develop initially your biotech platform, you'd start to develop product, one product would catch, and as soon as it did, it would sort of take all the resources with it, and the platform would freeze. Ginkgo had made an early constitutional decision of being platform only. So how would it get into product end markets? Well, it would be able to work with these companies closely and do it that way. And yeah, so I think of it as a division of labor by comparative advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me then, how, is it still a question for you of finding the entrepreneur that's got the great idea and then introducing them to the platform? How does something like deal flow work, and opportunities for you to find entrepreneurs, as it were?
Yeah, that's always a great question. Where do great ideas come from? A lot of it is internal ideation and incubation. And getting conviction around a market area or a company thesis and doing the first iterations ourselves, and then trying to go find that operator, which is always the kind of just-in-time problem. Or conversely, as people are getting to know us more and more, we see EIRs and operators showing up with an idea, with an interesting idea, or with a great idea, or with an idea that maybe needs a few more turns before it gleams. And so we kind of do it both ways.
Got it.
But I think you're right. Like, having that talent is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have had lots of conversations, over the years around that. But what's interesting is there may be some ideas that you work with internally where all of a sudden it's going to fly, and then it's about trying to find the leader that can come in and take that to the next level, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of our thesis here at Ferment is that the company creation looks different now in synthetic biology because of the rise of foundries and companies like Ginkgo, but also the kind of founders look different, right? So the folks that we're typically working with are deep in a domain, whether it's food or ag or animal health or probiotics. They've usually established themselves in that market space and are relatively new to the synthetic biology space, right? So you think of somebody who's a commercial leader, like Nicole Richards was when she was at DuPont, right? She was a technology translator. She's working, working in the wastewater group in M&A, but hadn't spent much time in biotech. Or John McIntyre, right? He'd been overseeing food R&D for Pepsi and Frito-Lay. So somebody who'd made products that billions of people had touched. And so what we're doing is bringing them into the Ginkgo ecosystem and showing them, look, think of biology now as a great new manufacturing technology, can solve problems that, typical systems, manufacturing, chemistry, plant extraction couldn't in the past. What can you do with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these folks tend to be much more product oriented, commercial in mindset.
Yeah.
They're focusing on orbiting around their customer, around their product development cycle. They're obsessed with first dollar in. And that's a perfect complement, to a very robust technology platform.
Yeah, very different from, if I think about the traditional type of startup or the founding technical founder that's led something, essentially that's sometimes lacking the industry knowledge or the product knowledge or the market fit. So this is really spinning it on its head completely.
I think so, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do with all of these companies, right? And we're choosing markets and opportunities where SynBio or an engineered cell can create differential value, and we know that's true through our diligence because we're able to do that diligence in conjunction with the technical teams at Ginkgo, right? Which is often frankly a black box for other investors, right? Because we've spent the last 8-10 years of our careers personally thinking hard about where SynBio delivers value, what an engineered cell can do, where to get it, what to pay for it, right? So we're now converting that into company creation thesis. We can then accelerate the company by putting it on top of Ginkgo's Foundry platform, right? So it's born day one with 700 scientists it can outsource work to. I mentioned that the kind of teams we're building are product focused, right? Focused on the application science and getting to market. You can therefore attract a world-class leader, right? We're also capitalizing the companies in such a way that they can develop a portfolio of products rather than being sort of a single shot on a single ingredient. Because as I said earlier, I think that makes it, the single ingredient play makes it hard for you to be a true solution provider, true core supplier to large sophisticated CPGs or others. And we're also working often very times closely with corporate investors, corporate strategics. Most of our companies also have a corporate as well as a financial backer. We've built companies with Chanel, with Fonterra, with Louis Dreyfus, with Suncor, with Battelle, with Elanco, right? And so being able to bring a strategic partner to the table is interesting as well. There's a lot of knowledge there. There's understanding of markets. There's clear problem statements and ways that the company can start to solve them out of the gate. So, I'm kind of taking you through our thesis of what we think differentiates a studio built or a Ferment Co built company. It makes it more primed for success. And the last thing I'll add is that we bring, through all these repetitions, we bring mental models and what I'll call SOPs to operators, right? To understand how to build a business on a fast scaling platform like Ginkgo. The rules aren't obvious, but through repetition, we think we're starting to drill down on some of the things that are true and not true about getting benefit from these platforms and infusing those learnings into everything from R&D portfolio management, capital allocation to IP, to structuring early commercial deals. This reminds me a little bit of what SaaS company building was like in the 90s. We take it for granted now that building a B2B software business has a playbook, but that's because tens of thousands have been built. 25 years ago, those rules weren't obvious. I think what we're doing with Ferment Co is starting to get the repetitions, the trial and error that show us what are the most efficient ways to develop these businesses and prime them for success.
So tell me then, with that being said, what are some of the the top two truths that you've learned through that repetition?
I think that there are many truths. One of the things that we preach incessantly, though, is product focus. And being not technology in search of a problem, but being extremely clear on what your product is, what value you create, who the customer is going to be from day one, right? And so we are very focused on product and productization and not taking for granted how hard that is. Also, equivalent challenge to the biotech, and you need to de-risk both of those in tandem. A lot of times what I saw was that companies or company founders that might be more technically oriented were orbiting more toward problems they were comfortable with. Those would be sort of early, let's call it platform or biotech problems, and coming to product later and doing it sequentially. I think it's critical to do this de-risking in parallel. Other rules of the road are around portfolio management, right? How do you understand how to allocate capital into projects that are working, and how to decelerate quickly and viciously on ones that aren't. A lot of times companies can get emotionally tied to programs, either because they have too few or because this was, early and foundational for them or whatever. But, biotech, that can be a killer. So I think what you've got to be very rigorous about is something making progress, something developing along the timeline we expect. Do we really understand the KPIs and the risks, and where those are, and when things are looking good or not? So we drive a pretty rigorous R&D portfolio management mentality, among other things. We've talked about hiring, we talked about team building, et cetera.
Yeah. Any perceptions or views on hiring, team building, anything that stands out for you?
I think what I really enjoy is bringing folks into an ecosystem like Ginkgo's, who are coming from industries and have created track record in those industries, but it's almost like they're starting fresh because they're getting involved with the new technology that's growing quickly and that's complex. And so I love seeing sort of a seasoned operator feel like they're suddenly naive again.
Yeah.
Right? And what's really interesting is trying to set up, a North Star and a vision for the company that's sufficiently ambitious, right? To do something disruptive and truly different in a market. But that also takes advantage of what we already know about the way that market is structured, the way that key customers make decisions, and the fact that we're going to have to, as disruptive as we want to be, we also want to be compatible with the realities of that particular marketplace. So it's sort of like finding this sweet spot between doing something new and different, whether on the product side or the business model side, but at the same time, being deeply informed on what the decision makers we're working with on the other side need, what their problems actually are, and how we can create value for them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And so when you think about some of the markets or some of the companies that you've invested in, how many companies have you created so far at Ferment?
We've done 6 so far at Ferment. We've done, I'll list them quickly. We did Motif, that's focused on fermenting food ingredients. We did Alonia, focused on biotech for waste remediation, waste upcycling. We did Archaea, which is focused on beauty ingredients, personal care. We then, in the fall of 2021, we did 2 companies focused around the theme of human nutrition. So we did Verb Biotics, which is focused on consumer probiotics. And then we did Iona Bio, which is focused on actually both microbial and plant cell fermentation to create bioactive molecules for nutrition, nutraceutical, complementary medicine. And then a few months ago, we launched Biome Edit, which is focusing on microbiome science for animal health. We did that in collaboration with Elanco.
Great. All really exciting areas. And do you see the future? So when you look at the business, what's the dream for you when you think about, I don't know, do you look 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead in terms of where, the numbers of companies that you would hope to?
I think we have a chance to build dozens of great companies. I think the markets here are quite expansive. I think, as I said, the technology is developing. There's, markets. When I look at large markets where biotech has a toehold, or where it's central, but where we really haven't begun to even crack open the hood on the genetics of those production organisms, you've got markets like brewing and distilling, or winemaking and baking, things like that get me excited. Of course, there's biomaterials, right? A range of specialty additives that you can use to make compounds to enable industries like EV and transport or additive manufacturing. There's a whole world of life sciences, therapeutics, obviously, but not just therapeutics. Think of cell therapies and RNA-based medicines and supply chains that they need to get off the ground are exciting to us. Think areas like cell-free manufacturing are intriguing. You're even starting to see biofuels come back with a vengeance in the current environment. So I think that there's going to be an expansive range of opportunity. Our job is to filter and figure out and pair the best operators with the very best company ideas and help them succeed.
That sounds it sounds really exciting. And what about just in terms of the nature of the market right now? How have you seen where we are on the cycle of growth, as it were?
Yeah, I guess I would say, I think, we're speaking now on June 7th, 2022. It's an interesting time. I think there's there's been a lot of volatility and a big reset right now in growth multiples and in valuations. I think people are in sort of a freeze mode, figuring out what the future holds. I personally think that there'll be sort of an equilibrium in the next couple of months where, the realization is that we're building long-term businesses to begin with, right? So the way we've designed them is to be resilient to drawdowns in the market, exactly like what we're experiencing. It's a great example of why working and being able to outsource work to the foundry is powerful for these companies, because they're headcount light. At least the Ferment Co companies that we build, we haven't had to build up large biotech platforms inside them or large teams inside them that you suddenly have to figure out how you're going to carry till your next raise. So that flexibility is really playing out. I think that more than ever, companies have to be product focused and focused on, not just product, but unit economics. And I think they have to be extremely rational with how they're using their capital to advance R&D. That's how I think that's how you enforce the discipline to get through markets like this, and how I think you show investors that you're stretching every dollar. And so thankfully, I think those are some lessons that we've been implying in to these companies since we started designing them, right? Managing the fact that biotech risk it still exists. We're getting better at designing with biology, but these timelines can be long still. So you got to be very smart about how you manage your programs and complement your products sometimes with products from other markets or other technologies.
That's great. Thank you for that. Just to ask about the challenge of scale up. Is that still the main challenge, in terms of taking it from the foundry or taking it, in a lab setup into something which is of, kind of tonnage, as it were, and finding the right manufacturing partners and capability? Is that still the single?
Yeah, I would say, I'd say that this is a truism of almost any industry, right? Going from benchtop to pilot scale and beyond. And I think in synthetic biology, what's interesting now is there's sort of a traffic jam of ingredients trying to get to market and tapping into what is perceived as limited capacity for large scale fermentation. It's interesting though, because I think that that's going to change. You see a lot of folks going directly at developing scaled fermentation capacity to manage this. I think in terms of whether a product works, so to speak, the economics work at large scale, I think that there's been enough blow-ups along the way that those are questions that people are now asking early on in the life cycle of product development and the life cycle of companies. And if they're not asking those questions, I'd say they're remiss. But so I think the industry sort of shifted from wondering if we can scale to thinking about it from day one, and embedding that into everything from program design to product selection. And I know most companies are thinking hard about where they're going to manufacture well before they even have a commercial ready microbe.
Yeah, that's great. Well, look, Jason, it's been great having you on today. We could talk all day.
Yeah, we absolutely could. Thank you, Simon. It's been a blast.
And
Enjoyed being able to speak, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Absolutely. I'm wishing you all the best, and we'll stay close, and best of luck as you scale and grow Ferment.
Thank you very much, sir.